On today's episode, they may try to bury us, but that's because they don't know we're seeds. And given the premise of the run, I know you might be tempted to say that I am the bad guy here. I disagree. I hold everyone in this game accountable for the things I'm going to do to them because they're trying to keep me in Dark Souls 2. So strap on your Nigerian prince robes and let's seek some misery as we hope to find out whether I can beat Dark Souls 2 with only NPC drops. Now while I'm getting used to the feel of the game again after a few years away, let's run through the rules. We do not use any weapon, armor, or ring that isn't dropped to us from a dead NPC. Emphasis on dead. Items which are freely given do not count, they must be pilfered. And obviously, damage-dealing consumables are also not allowed. And secondly, because I've made a point of not actually knowing what the majority of the NPCs in this game drop, I also have no way of knowing how difficult this run will even be, and since we have to kill the merchant hag anyway, we're also going to make it a no life gem run. Which honestly, doubles the difficulty of this game in and of itself on account of just how ridiculous they are, so that should balance things out a little. And lastly, while we will be cleaning up most of the fan favorites, this is not an all bosses run because I genuinely do not know where several of them are. This is by far my least played Soulsborne game, so this will be more of a reach the end credits sort of run. No glitches. Now once we finally make our way to the hut, the old ladies bully us, we remember our name, and it's on to character creation. I decided to go with the swordsman class because one of the few drops I do know about is Pate's spear, and we're gonna need some serious dex to wield it. Then we make ourselves as wide as the game will allow, get the most fucked up cut available, and push on into the real world where we discard all of our equipment, and I use the tutorial mobs to practice my bare hand parry timings. This whole thing might go poorly. Once we hit Majula, I grab the juice and begin the trek toward Hyde's Tower of Flame in pursuit of some easy souls. After evading the comically large knights, I go for the time save jump and botch it. Second try, we stick the landing, but then I realize I forgot something and we actually have to go back to Majula. And this is not the last time this will happen, so if you find yourself confused by my pathing at any point, just know I am not doing something clever, I am sincerely fucking lost. Once we make it home, I approach the armor fella and decide to start a little turf war. But after all the parry practice we've had, this should be a cakewalk. You know, in hindsight, I probably could have watched a better player do this first, but it's no big deal because 17 actual minutes later, I stopped trying to be fancy and just stun lock him against a wall, successfully killing our first NPC and earning us the Seldora set. Now in terms of actual defense, this stuff is only marginally better than literally wearing nothing, but it does have one major benefit, that being a collective 22.5% boost to soul absorption, and I'm not one to complain about getting paid. So draped in new swag, we can head back to the tower, and I think that everybody knows what happens next. Dragon Rider stops and thinks about it for a second, before deciding that this life isn't worth it and dipping out, giving us the souls we need to crank our dexterity and put a crumb or two into health. Then we can move on to the Forest of Fallen Giants, absolutely obliterate this homeless man's spine, and climb our first big ladder. We try to make a coordinated sprint to the next bonfire to avoid being surrounded with no weapon, and it doesn't pan out. Next try, we thin the herd a little beforehand and get them going in a train, COD 5 style, to buy the time we need to get away. Pushing further into the region, we snag the Estus shard and tactically open up the shortcut wall. And now that our next target is right nearby, we need to bring the pimpan to a few of the trash mobs to buy ourselves some breathing room. When we see Pate, it is fight on sight, but I botch the parry again and get poked into the dirt. So for attempt number 2, I decide to just lock him in an endless cycle of backstabs to secure the win, earning us Pate's Spear, a pretty decent dex weapon, and the Ring of Thorns, which has a 30% chance to launch out some low damage projectiles anytime we take damage. And with our new gear strapped on, we can head back to Majula and set the Crestfallen free, nabbing the Ring of Steel protection to increase our physical defense. Then it's back to the forest, where we make sure to buy the blacksmith's key beforehand, then take the hag out of the equation as well to earn the covetous Silver Serpent Ring, further increasing our soul absorption. Then there's no time to waste, so we head downstairs to our next boss, the Last Giant, where we circle around and nibble at his ankles for the quick win. Then it's back across the scaffolding and into the cave to meet our buddy Kale, who gives us a key to the Majula mansion. Then we do the young buck a favor and pilfer his hat, which honestly brings this whole fit together. And now the next target on our list is the Pursuer, and there's nothing in the rules of this run that says I can't shoot him with the ballista, so I do that, because it's funny. Then we make like a bird and get carried off to a very cool and fun area called the Lost Bastille. And our unupgraded spear isn't exactly a powerhouse weapon just yet, but our massive reach is pretty handy. Exhibit A being our fight with the finest swordswoman of her land, Lucatil, who was helplessly kept at bay and poked to death at a very slow rate before dropping us her mask, which I honestly don't think we're going to get much mileage out of. Pushing on, the explosive barrel refuses to do the very thing it exists to do, and we have to pivot into the rabid dog flaming arrow kill box, where frankly, no amount of reach was going to save us. Next try, the barrel does its fucking job, and we can kill the schizo blacksmith to loot a titanite slab and a twinkly to get our spear to +1. Then we maneuver past the kill box to lure out the next pursuer, because these guys also drop twinklies. Now there's only a moderately cancerous run-up standing between me and the ruined sentinels. And with absolutely nothing invested into ADP, I'm having a genuinely difficult time dealing with their sweep attacks. Also, Yahim launched himself off the platform like 5 goddamn times in one fight. I do not think he's taking this very seriously. Anyway, this whole debacle took a few more tries than I anticipated, but before long, we play it slow and use the pillars to our advantage, squeaking out a victory with nothing left in the tank. And not far past them is our next pursuer ambush, where we can earn the twinkly we so crave. And with our sharp stick ascended to +2, I think we are beyond ready to deal with Benhart, who says some cryptic nonsense before dropping us his Blue Moon Greatsword. And just based on how much damage he was dealing to us, I'm gonna assume it's an underwhelming weapon, but I'm just happy it's not another goddamn hat. And since weapons need upgrades and statues need unfreezing, we're making another pit stop back in the forest to partake in a leap of faith. I am done having faith. But as it was written in the good book, third time is a charm, and we cross the canyon onto the next hill to grab a couple twinklies and a fragrant branch of yore, which will come in handy shortly after we progress through the several rooms filled with guys who explode portion of the Bastille, because in the final room we can free the Sorcerer Strayed, who is generally pretty useful because he creates boss weapons, but you might notice that that is not super useful to us, so we use his feeble lack of poise to our advantage by stun-locking him to death, earning us a black hood. I probably should have seen that coming, but it gets even better because we don't even have the stats to wear it properly. I completely forgot that was a feature in this game. But there's no time to worry about that, because now we've reached the run-up to our first Great Soul boss, the Lost Sinner. And it is just terrible. But if you, viewer, were unhappy about the fact that I'm completely skipping No Man's Wharf, you can take solace in watching the Flexile Sentry kill me here instead. Now when we do finally make it through, I remember that Sinner's Arena has a bit of a light gimmick, where we would want to use a torch on these things here to brighten the place up. But I don't have any items that light up torches, and there is no way in hell I'm carrying a torch from the bonfire, so we get to fight her in the dark and take our lock-on penalty like a man. And she's generally not a very tough boss, but coming in with only one heal to spare is an uphill battle, and we end up fumbling at the 1 yard line. The next time around, we keep the run-up smooth, however, and in spite of her many impressive flips, the Sinner ends up flatlined, so we can light our first primal bonfire and carry on. Next stop is the Emerald Herald to waste a bunch of level ups on strength in order to wield the funny blue sword. Then we run over to the Tower of Flame and chat with Lycia, who has unfortunately outlived her usefulness. But even more unfortunately, I forgot that the bearer of the curse is fitted with permanent fucking roller skates, and she technically gets one over on us before we repay the favor, earning us the Idol's Chime, which may come in handy if we ever find a hex or miracle, as well as the Rotunda Lockstone that will get us into Huntsman's Copse, where we'll be heading next. And imagine my joy when I spot another NPC, whose name I didn't really have time to learn, right there on the trail. Now his dialogue made it clear that he's only really here to help int builds, so I gave him what he deserved, and wound up with the Sunset Staff. And again, we have nothing to cast, but we can try it out as a whacking stick. I don't think I'm going to use this much. Now onto the Copse proper. Our damage output is really solid for this point in the game, so no issue there. But I did learn that Dark Souls 2 Poison is an absolute bitch when you can't spam life gems. We'll need to keep an eye on that. But the more pressing issue is that we need to find the key for this door here, because behind it is a bonfire and an NPC named Creighton. And if I ever knew where the key was, I do not anymore, so I explore the cave, hit a dead end, and get cut down. Then I spend a long time wandering confused, then I do it again. Turns out, you don't have to go anywhere near that cave, you just cross the bridge and go straight. It's in, like, a really obvious spot, guarded by this goober. Consider my expectations subverted. Now once we get inside, Creighton tells us how old Pate betrayed him. We let him know he doesn't have to stress about that hooligan any longer. Then we do what's gotta be done. I was really hoping, just based on this guy's whole aura, that he'd drop us a nice weapon, or maybe some real armor, but I suppose another motherfucking hat will have to do. Next up is the Skeleton Lord's fight, and I decide to whip out the funny blue sword, because it attacks in a horizontal motion that I figured would be better for addressing the horde. And it all goes swimmingly. Then we find ourselves in Harvest Valley, send the rock girl back to Majula for future use, and honestly, not a lot worth yapping about really happens here. You spend all your Estus healing poison, join the Sunlight Bros, and then it's on to Covetous Demon, who actually almost killed me before I locked in due to the fear of shame. And the second half of the region is more of the same. I get a little lost, a little annoyed, commit a pretty extreme act of arson, and eventually stumble onto the secret bonfire outside of Mytha's boss room. And with her poison dried up, Mytha's damage output just isn't where it needs to be, so while it's a bit sloppy, we get a relatively easy win before ascending up into my personal hell. So, Iron Keep Step 1, deal with the tedious invasions. Simple enough. Step 2, meet Magirold in this back corner. And honestly, he seems like a pretty good guy. I bought a couple useful items from him, and he gave me a pretty nice ring for free. Obviously we can't use it, but I do appreciate the thought. Anyway, we stab him to death, and he drops us another copy of that same ring that we can now use. I'll keep you in my thoughts, big guy. Now step 3, engage in some tomfoolery and die many, many times. I don't know that I could say this is a truly awful region. It just demands a lot of spatial awareness and baiting the, to say the least, unreliable enemy AI into doing what you want. And I think our lack of healing prowess and the fact that most of our armor is basically useless is starting to catch up with us. But a few ganks and falls into lava later, we finally make it to our second Great Soul boss, the Old Iron King. And he pretty promptly bitches us into some more lava. And then I realize I must have missed a bonfire somewhere, because this is an atrocious run back even by this game's standards. Then I found it. Turns out it's up this sneaky ladder right before you descend down to the King's Arena. And while I have plans for this at a future date, we won't actually need to worry about it for the time being, because a series of jabs to the hand eventually renders the king lifeless, and we acquire our second Great Soul. Returning back to Majula, we contemplate the whole before deciding our time is better spent elsewhere. More specifically, we unfreeze Rosabeth and give her a full set of the Alon Knight armor we cannot wear in order to gain access to the Shaded Woods, where I go down the wrong path twice, and generally spend a bit of time lost before finally stumbling into Nashka's boss room and receiving a warm welcome. So, we hug her sides for round 2 and end the conflict quickly. And we don't have much business with the Doors of Pharos, so we jog through and make our way into Brightstone Cove Seldora, in pursuit of our next Great Soul boss, the Duke's dear Freya. But before we can attend that rendezvous, we have to deal with peak boss design, and I become the first man in the world to die to Prowling Magus and the fucking congregation. So I make the difficult decision to sober up and lock in, trivializing the next run-through. And this is another point in the run where we have broken a new barrier and are introduced to a new mechanic, Arbiter Spirit Invasions. These are goody two-shoes players who are here to punish us because our rampant murder has accumulated us 10 points of sin. And I had no idea this sin mechanic even existed. I had to look this up. But basically, Blue Spirit Invasions are going to be a pretty regular event for the rest of the run. Thankfully, this first guy fails the vigor check pretty quickly, and we can press on through this Chinese puzzle box of a location, dramatically fail to perform parkour, and be invaded by the NPC Bowman Guthrie. And usually, an NPC invasion wouldn't be all that noteworthy, but this guy did something I didn't know they could do, and dropped me a new pair of gloves, which is totally fair game. Thank you, Guthrie. Pushing further in, we light up a torch to better explore the dark chasms and keep spiders at bay, then saunter into the big girl's arena. And maybe I should have known better than to approach with my health in such a sorry state, but my arrogance got the better of me, and I became the victim of a fourth quarter stomp out. On the next run, a forlorn invasion completely trashes my flow state, and Freya catches me lacking once again. And at this point, I'm already spiraling a bit, so run 3 has a pretty ugly first half, before the inevitable lock-in with no health remaining allows us to put the spider away. And in a normal playthrough, with 3 Great Souls acquired, this would be the point where we are forced to descend down the hole and find the Rotten. But this is not a normal playthrough, so we're going to switch things up and head back to the Iron Keep. Because by using a bonfire ascetic on the checkpoint closest to the boss, we can respawn the Old Iron King in his New Game Plus form, which will not only get us the 4th Great Soul we need while providing a better payout than the Rotten, it also saves us from trekking through a couple areas that our build is very poorly equipped to handle. The bad news is that resetting the area spawns in a spooky red phantom that gives us the what for. So we stop playing nice and phone our old friend Gravity for a bit of a double team. Now when it comes to the king himself, our pre-warm-up, our warm-up, and our practice round are all filled with valuable teaching moments and a gnawing sense that I should probably go outside, which served me well heading into our first real attempt where the king was easily poked into submission, granting us our fourth great soul and some new regions to explore. But first, we had to make a pit stop back in the game's intro to kill all these hags and earn ourselves a substantial number of human effigies. Now getting serious once again, it is time to progress through the Shrine of Winter and make our way to the elegant Drangleic Castle. And this place is a bit of a backstab buffet. I love this animation so much. And for a while, not many noteworthy things happened. It's a lot of hitting statues to see if they unfreeze, luring dudes into traps, getting caught in those same traps, and falling off of ledges. I also got invaded by an arbiter spirit named Regret, and I'll be honest, that is corny as hell, bro. But he wasn't able to hunt me down before I wandered into the Twin Dragon Riders, so it was a bit of a non-issue. Now for these two, I decided on the strategy of having the strong rider knock the feeble one off his ledge, then wailing on them both. And this ended up working pretty well. Pushing further into the area, we complete some more golem-based puzzles, ride the elevator up into some of the freakiest shit I have ever seen, and unlock the run-up to the Looking Glass Knight, where I move too slowly and find myself ganked by some rather intimidating furries. Quick reset. Now on to the fight proper. It is a definite favorite of mine. Good vibes all around on this stormy, decrepit roof. And while he and his gank mate do their very best, it doesn't amount to much this time, and we secure the win. Which means that we are, unfortunately, free to explore the infamous Shrine of Amana. And I joke, but outside of a couple truly baffling design choices, it really isn't too bad. Just move slow, take time to chat up the Milfinitos, yes, that is what they're called, and do not venture into deep water. Now onto the frog, he's a pretty straightforward encounter. Attack him when the face pops out, do not get caught lacking, and he should go down without much trouble. And now that he's taken care of, we have access to the unbridled shit show, which goes by the name Undead Crypt. Shortly inside, we meet a blue fellow by the name of Agdane, and apparently he's the one that's in charge here, so we give him his performance review, and then I start to fear I've made a grave mistake, as me and the entirety of the crypt are now stuck in a cycle of fight on sight. So this takes a few tries to acclimate to, but once we whittle it down to just the two of us, Agdane shows that he was just a big talker and ends up dropping us his man skirt. And because I haven't made enough mistakes in my life, I decide to light this sconce immediately after, which it turns out, summons phantoms. But it's okay, they fit in quite well with all the forlorns and arbiter spirits that are already running around. And eventually, I catch a break and find my way through the chaos to Velstadt, the final obstacle between me and the king. And on this first run, he catches me with a move I did not know existed, and we return to the struggle. The next attempt is even more of a heartbreaker, as I had no clue this guy had such a short refractory period. Thankfully, by attempt 3, he doesn't have any tricks that I haven't seen, and it is relatively smooth sailing. Then we can enter the chamber behind him, run past the big goober, and pick up the king's ring. And now the bad news. We could theoretically make this a glitch run and use parry walking to get around some of the doors that the king's ring is meant to open, but as far as I know, it cannot get us through all of them, so we're gonna have to bite the bullet and equip a non-NPC drop, technically failing the run. But we've come this far, so we might as well finish up and head into Aldia's Keep, where our first task is dealing with legendary swordsman Lucatil's brother, and our second task is haphazardly sprinting through the entire place to reach the guardian dragon, who is honestly a bit of a squish for this late in the game, though like all dragons, he does do a bit of a number on the camera. Easy W. Then, before we get to anything more pressing, I head back to Majula and deal with Laddersmith Gilligan, because I remember what he did to me in another life, earning us a toy ladder and a spiffy new scimitar. I should have known I was gonna get lucky when he wasn't wearing a hat. Now the weapon is nothing special, but it will be nice to spice things up. And knowing that I have to take it for a spin, we head over and say goodbye to Rosabeth, who drops us a fire seed. Back on track now, we can head through the Dragon Eyrie into the shrine, where the absolute dickhead that is the ancient dragon forces us to engage in a series of honorable duels for the privilege of speaking to him. This is definitely not as cool as he thinks it is, but in the end he gives us the Ashen Mist Heart and officially lands on our shit list to be dealt with later. And what the heart actually does is allow us to enter the memories of certain important figures around the world, mostly dead giants. So we head back to the forest full of dead giants and get to work. Inside the first memory, we spot the Giant Lord before getting sniped by a cannon. But once we reach the fight proper, it's mostly just the last giant again with a fuckier camera, so before long, he's made a non-issue. In the next memory, we encounter a crippled old soldier by the name of Drummond, and I can't shake the feeling that this little son of a bitch is faking it. So I provoke him, and sure enough, he gets up for a fight right as rain. And he ends up dropping us a hat that, honestly, I'm not even going to look at. Then, on to the final memory. Outside of a funny little trapped chest, there's not a lot going on here, so we claim our third giant soul and dip out, planning us quite squarely into the endgame, meaning there's a lot of cleanup left to do. And since we have no more use for any precious stones, we start with the rock girl, who drops us a pale stone. On that same wavelength, we move on to our boy the blacksmith, who gives us his trusty hammer, which is probably a pretty fun weapon, but unfortunately, there's no one left to upgrade it, so it probably won't see much action. And you know we're not allowed to play favorites, so the next to go is the Emerald Herald, who dies without a word and drops nothing. But I think she probably would have dropped the Aged Feather if she hadn't already given it to us. And with those tough but necessary actions out of the way, we can return to Drangleic Castle, pass the King's Gate, and enter the Throne of Want. But there's still a few items to take care of before we can sit on the chair. The first two being Throne Watcher and Throne Defender, which is a pretty good gang fight in my book. They just have distractingly silly names, and they manage to piece me up on attempt 1 before I can learn both their tells. On try 2, we stay a bit reckless and keep the pressure on, and while this does result in us hemorrhaging all of our Estus, the win is secured. Unfortunately, Queen Nishandra has decided to have a little bit of a woman moment, and we have no health left to address this issue, so she cuts us down without much problem. And after a lengthy and atmospheric run back, she continues to obliterate our small health pool with Curse, but it is literally Nishandra, so my pride simply won't allow a failure here, and with repeated pokes, we put an end to her goofy, centuries-long plan. Now all that's left to do is get comfortable and sit on the throne, not beating Dark Souls 2 with only NPC drops. But that isn't the end of the story. Firstly, because there's about 8 minutes of unskippable credits to get through. Thank you for your hard work, Toshifumi Nabashima. And secondly, because I wanted to do a few cleanup bonus rounds. Just the 3 bosses we already discovered and decided to ignore. And the first on that list is back at the Dragon Shrine. So we survive the Ancient Dragon's stupid combat gauntlet and ascend up to his platform. And I know this guy used to have a well-deserved reputation for being annoying bullshit, but these days, you'll find a substantial number of notes on the ground telling you to hug the dragon's back left foot, and it is almost unfair how well this strategy works. I straight up did not get hit the entire fight, which is very, very uncommon for me. How the mighty have fallen. And our next stop is back in the goddamn Iron Keep, because I never addressed the issue that is the Smelter Demon, mostly because I despise him and the place he lives. So we charge in and start dealing with the dozen knights you have to kill beforehand, before being invaded by a new cornball who hits me with that crystal rapier build. I hope your parents don't love you. Next try, we actually reach the boss proper, and I get a taste of my own medicine as I forget which button does the dodging and am systematically poked to death. Anyway, 1 4-minute run-up later, I am done playing games, and with cautious maneuvering, we can close the book on the Iron Keep saga and never ever come back. And I think it's fitting that we end our adventure back in the Undead Crypt, hot on the tail of King Vendrick. And the gimmick with Vendrick is that the more giant souls you've acquired, up to a maximum of 5, the more you weaken his defenses. And we happen to be sitting on 4, which we'll have to do, because I don't even know where the 5th one is, but if it's down the hole, you can forget about it. So after another of the game's more atrocious run-ups, we come face to face with the king, bite at his ankles until he realizes we're there, at which point he gives me the 3-piece wombo and shuts the attempt down pretty quickly. I think we're gonna call this one a fluke, or maybe I'm just bad at the video game. But third time is once again a charm, as my smooth brain is finally able to comprehend his incredibly slow movement and put the king to rest. Then, if you want, you can go inside his memories and let him explain the plot of the game to you. But we already beat it, so at the moment it's feeling a little redundant. And that is the DS2 NPC drop experience. If you've got other run recommendations, let me know. If you want a shout out and access to some exclusive monthly playthroughs and Yap sessions, feel free to become a channel member. I'll talk to you guys later.